Hi, it's Hella from Dawn Emporium, and today is the 1st of July. Now, being from Britain, my newsfeed is just full of posts about the Somme battle in World War One. 105 years ago, just in case you were wondering. And although that was a terrible tragedy that took a lot of lives, you may have noticed a very slight orange undertones going on today, and that is for another tragedy that took a lot of lives somewhere else. Something came up on my newsfeed from a friend about something that I'd heard about before, and I didn't realise there was a day for it until the other day. And I was ill with a cold at the time, otherwise I'd have made this video beforehand so more people might have picked up on it and joined in with the orange before today. Now, wearing orange on the 1st of July is in remembrance of Indigenous Americans that died in the reformist boarding schools and schools in America. They were known as Native American boarding schools and Indian residential schools. What basically happened was children were ripped away from their families. Some of them had their names changed, some for saints' names, some just for more acceptable names. What is unacceptable about your own name? They were forced to speak English. They weren't allowed to speak their own languages. They had to follow Christianity, wear Western clothes. They had their hair cut to how Westerners have their hair. They just weren't allowed to be themselves. The whole stated rationale was kill the Indian, save the man. How brutal is that? Didn't just happen over in America, it happened in other countries too. In fact, anywhere that Europeans went, we tried to wipe out the locals. So if there's any other days like this, please let me know. I'm willing to let people know what your people went through. Now, some continue to operate to this day. The closest date I have is in 2007, there were 15 left. However, in 1909, there were 25 off-reservation schools, 157 on-reservation schools, and 307 day schools operating. Imagine how terrifying that would be. Now, a day school is like what most children these days go to. You start in the morning, you come home in the afternoon. But you were forced to go to these schools. You couldn't go to your own school with your own people. You were literally carted off and had to be Western while you were there, right? For the boarding schools, it was horrific. And I do mean horrific. We're talking, there was malnutrition, disease, overcrowding, overworking. That's a fun one. Abuse was rife and rampant, and this caused a lot of deaths for those children. And what's even worse is a lot of those children, we don't even know where they're buried. I mean, I remember reading an article not that long ago that a mass grave basically had just been found. Some of the children that had gone to that school had thought that there were kids buried there, and it took years to get those bodies dug up where they thought they were buried. And I think the school had closed something like in the 70s, and it took literally, I think it was about a year or two ago, just before COVID, that they got them dug up. And if I remember right, there were over 100 skeletal remains found. 100 children just gone. And these kids were told things like, oh, they've gone home or they've ran away, things like that. When they hadn't, they died and they'd just been forgotten about in a hole in the ground, gone. How horrific is that? Right? And I can't get my head around how one human could treat another human this. And what makes it worse is most of these were religious schools. Love thy neighbour, unless of course they happen to have a slightly different skin coloration. Right? So it doesn't help that the US government, since most of these schools have closed, have underfunded language revitalization programs. So Indigenous languages are being lost simply because the older generations are dying out and the younger generations, well, we'll say the middle-aged, still don't speak it. They have so much trauma from these schools. And the youngest generations, they don't know what to do with themselves. Everybody sits there now and they have this view of Indigenous Americans. They don't want to work, they don't care, they just want to take drugs. I mean, Indigenous women are the most likely to go missing and nobody actually care, right? How awful is that? How absolutely awful is that? Just because you happen to actually come from that country, nobody's going to care about you. And somebody is, well, actually one person's going to care, the person who's going to come along and steal you and probably your life. They're going to care about you enough to kill you, and nobody else is going to care. And that literally comes from these schools, because nobody cared before. So why are they going to care now? And the entire population is just sat there in a slump of depression because they don't think they're good enough. And that is thanks to these schools. I am so worked up and angry for thousands, and I do mean thousands, of lost children and the thousands of people left behind. Now, obviously, there are some good stories. Some people made lifelong friends. Some people met their one true love and married and settled down and had children. But that's the same in any situation. There are so many bad stories. One of them, Haskell Indian School Cemetery has 102 graves with 500 children buried elsewhere. Right, so that's 602 dead. I can't even imagine that. Can you imagine going to your local school and 602 children just going missing? You know, that is horrendous. If that was as in a normal civilized society, there would be uproar. But just because they were Indigenous Americans, they didn't matter. You know, they should have been speaking English. What? Why weren't they at birth called Elizabeth? Hello? I'm sorry. It's too much for me to comprehend that people would ever treat somebody else this way. So I have a lot of videos to make today because I was, like I say, ill for a few days, a bit backed up. T-shirt's going to change, makeup and earrings all stay in orange. And orange really isn't my colour. But I just wanted everyone to know just what went on. Read up on it. Have a look at other videos. There are people who know a lot more about it than me. I just wanted to help people become more aware of what actually happened at the hands of people civilizing another race. And as I say, if it happened to you, you know, your culture, the first one that springs to mind is Aboriginal people, because I know fine well it did happen to you. You have a day like this, let me know. I don't mind wearing a colour that clashes with every atom in my body just for you, or anything like that. I want people to know. And I'll see you in probably 5 minutes. Bye.